The message arrived at 0300 hours station time, and it broke every protocol Naomi Reyes had spent 15 years building. Ambassador Chin's daughter, taken. Velkari species. Confirmed abduction, not custody dispute. Deploy Cobalt team immediately. Naomi read it twice in the blue wash of her cabin's emergency lighting before she was even fully awake. Ambassador Marcus Chun wasn't just any diplomat. He was the architect of the Seoul Confederacy Accords, the human who'd convinced 11 alien species that Earth deserved a seat at the table instead of a leash around its neck. And his daughter wasn't human at all. Maylin Chun had been adopted 8 years ago from a Velkari refugee colony, back when the ambassador was still a junior attaché, and the Velkari were still being hunted by slavers who prized their bioluminescent nervous systems for black market neural interfaces. Someone had just decided to finish what those slavers started. Naomi was dressed in 90 seconds and in the briefing room in 4 minutes, which was still 40 seconds slower than Xavier Okafor, who was already there, arms crossed, staring at a star chart like it had personally offended him. "You saw the same message I did," she said. "I saw it before you did." Xavier didn't turn around. "Command flagged it to me first. Guess they still think I outrank you. They think you're scarier than me. I am scarier than you. You're taller than me. Different thing." She pulled up the tactical display, and the levity drained out of both their voices at once. The abduction site was a neutral trade station in the Thren Belt, supposedly one of the most heavily monitored, most heavily policed pieces of real estate in the quadrant, patrolled jointly by 4 species who agreed on almost nothing except that piracy was bad for business. And somehow, in the 11 minutes between the ambassador's daughter boarding a transit shuttle and that shuttle docking, 6 armed operatives had breached station security, subdued 2 Velkari bodyguards and a human escort, and vanished with a 14-year-old girl into open space. They knew the patrol rotations, Xavier said. They knew the shuttle schedule. They knew which bodyguards would be soft targets. This wasn't opportunistic. No. Naomi zoomed the display out, tracing the only sensor ghost they had, a heat bloom consistent with an unregistered stealth drive signature, bearing hard toward the fringe systems. This was planned by someone who wanted the ambassador to hurt, which means this isn't really about the girl. It's about him. Xavier's jaw tightened. And it's about proving humans can't protect the people who trust them. That was the part that made Naomi's blood run cold, colder than the tactical readouts, colder than the 11-minute gap in station security. Because if this was a message, aimed not at Chun, but at every species watching to see whether Earth's word was worth anything, then whoever took Maylin wasn't going to negotiate. They were going to make an example, which meant Cobalt team wasn't running a rescue operation. They were running a race against a deadline nobody had told them. The trail led to a derelict mining platform in the Kesavar Drift, a graveyard of dead industry orbiting a dying star, chosen, Naomi was certain, because its magnetic interference would blind most sensor arrays and its labyrinth of collapsed tunnels would swallow a rescue team whole. 6 operatives had become, by their best intelligence, at least 20 by the time the transport dropped Cobalt team's insertion pod 2 clicks out. Engines cold, running dark. "Talk to me about the layout," Xavier murmured, vacuum-suited, magnetized boots ticking softly against the platform's outer hull. Command centers buried 3 levels down, near the old reactor core. If they wanted defensible, they picked well. Naomi's HUD painted the platform's skeleton in ghost blue wireframe, built from 40-year-old mining schematics and a lot of educated guessing. "Life support's failing in half these sections. We've got maybe 6 hours before the whole structure loses Atmo entirely." "So do they?" "So does the girl." Xavier didn't answer that. He didn't need to. They'd worked together long enough that Naomi could read the set of his shoulders, the particular stillness that meant he'd already decided exactly how far he was willing to go, and the number wasn't small. They breached through a maintenance airlock nobody had bothered guarding, because nobody sane expected a 2-person extraction team against 20 hostiles. That was, Naomi had learned over 11 years in Cobalt team, precisely the mistake that got people killed, assuming numbers mattered more than the people attached to the numbers. The first 2 guards never heard them coming. Xavier moved through the dark tunnels like something out of an old Earth ghost story, all silence and sudden violence. And by the time the platform's interior guards realized their perimeter had a hole in it, Cobalt team was already inside the walls, moving through ventilation shafts too narrow for the mercenaries' bulkier exosuits. The first real resistance came at level 2, 4 guards in a control room, and this time the alarm went up before Xavier could silence it. Naomi didn't waste time being disappointed. She dropped a concussion charge through the ventilation grate, counted 2 seconds, and came through the door in the ringing aftermath, weapon already tracking. It was over in 6 seconds. It usually was, when you train the way Cobalt team trained. Not for glory, not for medals, but because somewhere out there, every single time, there was a person counting on you to be faster than their fear. Command levels crawling, Xavier said through comms, watching a knot of heat signatures converge 2 decks below. They know we're here now. No more quiet. Then we stop being quiet. Naomi checked her charge counter, found it sufficient, and didn't feel the fear she probably should have. 11 armed mercenaries between them and a scared 14-year-old girl who'd already been told, probably, that her father's people had abandoned her. That was supposed to be terrifying. Instead, it just made something in Naomi's chest burn steady and cold, the particular fury reserved for people who thought children were acceptable currency in someone else's grudge. They found Mei Lin in a cargo bay converted into a makeshift cell, 3 guards standing watch. The girl herself curled small against a bulkhead, with her bioluminescent markings pulsed dim with fear rather than their usual soft blue glow. She looked up when the door blew inward, and Naomi watched her flinch. Not toward the mercenaries for protection, but away from everyone, because 11 minutes of violence had taught her that adults with weapons meant danger no matter which side they claimed to be on. Mei Lin. Naomi kept her voice level even as Xavier dropped the last guard behind her. Your father sent us. We're getting you home. The girl's markings flickered, surprise, then something that might have been hope fighting through terror. You're human, she said, like it was an accusation. So's your dad. Doesn't mean we're all the same. Naomi crouched to her level, weapon lowered but not holstered, because the fight wasn't over and pretending otherwise would only get someone killed. I need you to trust me for the next 10 minutes. Can you do that? Mei Lin looked at her, really looked, the way children do when they're deciding whether an adult is lying, and nodded. The extraction wasn't clean. It never was. They fought through 6 more mercenaries on the way back to the airlock, and Xavier took a plasma graze across his shoulder that would leave a scar he'd complain about for months, and Naomi burned through every charge she'd brought and half of Xavier's besides. But they made it to the transport with the girl between them, alive, shaking, and, Naomi noted with fierce satisfaction, furious rather than broken, already demanding to know if her bodyguards had survived, already thinking about someone other than herself. Your father's people, Naomi told her later, once the platform was a shrinking ember behind them and Xavier had finally let the medic look at his shoulder, made it out. Bruised. Embarrassed. Alive. Mei Lin's markings pulsed a steadier blue. Why did you come, she asked. Really? I'm not. I'm not even human. Xavier looked over from the medbay cot, wincing as the medic worked. Doesn't matter what you are, he said. Matters that you're someone's kid, and someone hurt you to make a point. Earth doesn't let people make points out of kids. Not on our watch. It wasn't a policy. It wasn't in any accord Ambassador Chun had ever signed. But it was true, and it would be true tomorrow, and the next time someone decided humanity's word was a thing to be tested against a child's life, Cobalt team would come again. Faster, angrier, and just as unstoppable as the first time.